The alien fleet had every advantage: superior numbers, advanced technology, and a battle plan that was mathematically perfect. There was no way the humans could win. The alien commander was about to declare victory when his scanner detected something impossible. The humans were charging directly at them. Admiral Kethavar of the Zephyrian Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable Logic, studying the holographic display before him. 17 years of military academy training, 43 successful campaigns, and the most advanced tactical computer in the known galaxy had all contributed to this moment. The battle plan was flawless. "Sir," his tactical officer, Lieutenant Vexmari, reported with characteristic Zephyrian precision, "Final calculations confirm 99.97% probability of victory. Human resistance will be eliminated within 2.3 standard hours." Kethavar's 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The Zephyrian military doctrine was built on mathematical certainty. Every variable calculated, every outcome predicted, every contingency planned for. It was what made them the dominant force in this sector of the galaxy. The human colony of New Geneva hung in space before them like a ripe fruit ready to be plucked. Population, 2.3 million. Military assets, laughably inferior. Their largest warship was barely the size of a Zephyrian corvette, and their weapons technology was at least 50 years behind Galactic standard. "Deploy formations Alpha through Epsilon," Kethavar commanded. "Maintain optimal firing distances. Remember, we are not here to annihilate. We are here to demonstrate the futility of resistance to Zephyrian rule." 1,347 Zephyrian vessels moved into position with clockwork precision. Each ship knew exactly where to be, when to fire, and how to coordinate with every other vessel in the fleet. The tactical computer had optimized their formation to ensure maximum psychological impact with minimum resource expenditure. The humans had 12 ships. 12 aging, outdated, patched-together vessels that by all logical measures should have surrendered the moment the Zephyrian fleet entered the system. Yet there they sat, arranged in what could generously be called a defensive formation around their space station. "Sir," Vexmari said, a note of confusion creeping into his normally steady voice, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." "Audio only," Kethavar replied. He had no interest in seeing the face of defeat before victory was properly achieved. A gravelly voice filled the bridge, speaking in heavily accented Galactic standard. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Defiant. You are in violation of Colonial Federation space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The bridge fell silent for a moment before several officers began what Zephyrians called probability laughter, a sound like mathematical equations being solved very quickly. "Captain Chen," Kethavar replied with the patience of a professor explaining basic arithmetic to a child, "my tactical analysis indicates that you have 12 vessels against our fleet of over 1,000. Your weapons are inferior, your shields are outdated, and your hull integrity is questionable at best. Logic dictates immediate surrender." There was a pause before the human captain responded, "Logic's never been our strong suit, Admiral. Besides, 12 ships is more than we had at the Battle of Marathon Station, and we won that one too." Kethavar quickly accessed his database. The Battle of Marathon Station had been a minor skirmish 7 years ago, where human forces had achieved victory against a pirate fleet through what military historians called tactically inadvisable maneuvers, resulting in statistically improbable outcomes. In other words, they had gotten lucky. "Captain," Kethavar said with growing impatience, "luck is not a viable military strategy. I will give you 60 seconds to consider surrender." "Counteroffer," came the immediate reply. "You have 60 seconds to get out of our system before we show you why humans have been conquering impossible odds since we crawled out of our caves." The transmission ended. Kethavar stared at the tactical display, his analytical mind struggling to process what he had just heard. The humans were not merely refusing surrender, they were threatening him, with 12 ships, against his fleet of over 1,000. "Sir," Vexmari said quietly, "their behavior does not match any known psychological profile. Perhaps they are suffering from collective cognitive failure." "Run another analysis," Kethavar ordered. "There must be something we're missing. Hidden weapons, cloaked reinforcements, some kind of trap." The tactical computer worked for 37 seconds, an eternity by Zephyrian standards, before producing its report. No additional military assets detected, no evidence of advanced weaponry, no strategic advantages identified. Human forces remain tactically insignificant. "Sir!" Vexmari's voice cracked with disbelief. "The human ships! They're moving!" Kethavar's attention snapped to the tactical display. The 12 human vessels had broken formation and were accelerating directly toward the center of the Zephyrian fleet, not toward the flanks where they might have some marginal chance of breaking through, not in retreat toward the system's edge where they might escape, straight at the heart of his formation, where the concentration of firepower was heaviest. "Impossible," Kethavar muttered. "The tactical computer must be malfunctioning. Computer is functioning within normal parameters." The ship's AI reported in its melodious Zephyrian voice. "Human vessels are indeed advancing on intercept course with Fleet Center." The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the human ships accelerated well beyond what their engine specifications should have allowed. Somehow, they were pushing their ancient fusion drives to 110% of maximum rated output. "How are they maintaining engine integrity at those power levels?" the engineering officer asked. "They appeared to be improvising repairs in real time," the sensor operator reported. "Their engineering teams are literally welding hull patches while under acceleration." Kethavar felt something he hadn't experienced in his 43 successful campaigns: uncertainty. His tactical computer was offering dozens of probability matrices, but they all began with the same assumption, that the enemy would act rationally. "Sir, orders?" Vexmari asked. "All ships, open fire," Kethavar commanded. "Eliminate the human vessels before they can reach weapons range." The Zephyrian fleet unleashed a coordinated barrage that should have vaporized the approaching ships instantly. Particle beams, plasma torpedoes, and quantum missiles filled space with deadly energy, and the humans flew straight through it. Not around it, not away from it, through it. Their lead ship, the Defiant, took a direct hit from a plasma torpedo that should have cracked its hull like an egg. Instead, the ship's captain came on the open channel. "That all you got? My grandmother hits harder than that." "Impossible," Kethavar whispered. "Their shields cannot withstand that level of—" "Sir," the sensor operator interrupted. "They don't appear to be using shields." "What?" "All human vessels show shield generators offline. They're taking direct hull impacts and continuing to advance." Kethavar pulled up the sensor data himself. The human ships were indeed flying naked through his fleet's barrage, their hulls scarred and burning, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. By every measure of military science, they should be dead. Yet they kept coming. "Sir, the humans are now within weapons range," Vexmari reported, his voice tight with something approaching panic. The human ships opened fire with weapons that were, by Galactic standards, primitive. Chemical projectiles, nuclear warheads, and energy weapons that belonged in a museum. But they fired them with a ferocity that defied mathematical modeling. The UES Defiant rolled inverted and released its entire payload of nuclear missiles in a spread pattern that tactical analysis labeled as completely random. Yet somehow, 3 of them found their mark on Zephyrian destroyers, punching through their shields with brute kinetic force. "How are they targeting us?" the weapons officer demanded. "Their fire control systems are obsolete." "They appear to be eyeballing it," the sensor operator replied in disbelief. "Eyeballing? Manual targeting, sir. Human pilots are literally looking out their windows and choosing targets based on visual assessment. Another human ship, the UES Stubborn, had somehow managed to get within point defense range of a Zephyrian cruiser. Instead of using conventional weapons, it activated its docking clamps and latched onto the enemy vessel's hull. "What are they doing?" Kethavar demanded. His question was answered moments later when the Stubborn detonated its own fusion reactor, taking the cruiser with it in a brilliant flash of light. They're ramming us," Vexmari said in a voice barely above a whisper. "They're using their own ships as weapons." The battle, if it could still be called that, had been raging for 43 minutes. According to every tactical model, it should have been over in less than 5. Yet somehow, the humans continued fighting. They had lost 7 ships, but the remaining 5 were somehow more dangerous than the original 12. They fought like cornered animals, using tactics that existed in no military manual. The UES Reckless had run out of conventional ammunition and was now firing pieces of its own superstructure from improvised mass drivers. The UES Spite had lost its main engines and was using controlled explosions from its own damaged systems to maneuver. The UES Defiant had taken so much damage that it was more debris field than starship, yet it continued to fight. "Sir?" Vexmari reported, his usual composure completely shattered. "The humans are requesting parley." Kethavar almost laughed. "They want to surrender?" "No, sir. They want to give us a chance to surrender to them." The Zephyrian bridge fell silent except for the hum of overtaxed computers, trying to calculate probability matrices for events that shouldn't be mathematically possible. "Put them through," Kethavar said. Captain Chen's voice came through the comm, noticeably more ragged than before but still defiant. "Admiral, this is your last chance. You've lost 37 ships to our 5. At this rate, you'll run out of fleet. Before we run out of stubbornness." Kethavar checked the tactical display. She was right. 37 of his vessels had been destroyed or disabled by enemy action, not through superior firepower or advanced tactics, but through sheer, irrational aggression that his computers couldn't predict or counter. "Captain Chen," he said slowly, "your losses are catastrophic. Your remaining ships are barely functional. Logic dictates—" "Admiral," Chen interrupted, "I'm going to stop you right there. See, we've got a saying back on Earth. Logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. You've been fighting this battle like it's a chess match. We've been fighting it like our lives depend on it." "Your lives do depend on it," Kethavar pointed out. "Exactly. Which is why we're going to win." The transmission ended, and the human ships resumed their impossible advance. Kethavar watched as the UES Defiant, now held together by what appeared to be emergency patches and pure determination, somehow managed to slip past his screening destroyers and began a direct attack run on his flagship. "Sir, orders?" Vexmari asked. Kethavar stared at the tactical display. The mathematics were clear. He had numerical superiority, technological advantage, and strategic position. He should be winning. The fact that he wasn't meant that some variable in his calculations was fundamentally wrong. And then it hit him. "Computer," he said quietly, "run analysis on human psychological profiles. Focus on response to impossible odds." The computer worked for several seconds before responding. "Analysis complete. Humans demonstrate consistent pattern of increased performance when facing mathematically insurmountable challenges. This behavior appears to be species-wide and culturally reinforced. They fight harder when they should be losing." "Correct. Human military history shows repeated instances of victory achieved through persistence beyond logical breaking points." Kethavar felt something like understanding dawning in his analytical mind. "They're not fighting despite the impossible odds. They're fighting because of them." The UES Defiant was now close enough that Kethavar could see the battle damage through his ship's optical sensors. Hull breaches sealed with metal plates, weapon ports that had been welded shut and cut open again, and what appeared to be crew members in EVA suits making repairs to the outer hull while under fire. "Sir," his engineering officer reported, "their reactor is operating at 150% of design capacity. They should have suffered catastrophic failure 20 minutes ago." "But they haven't," Kethavar observed. "No, sir. It appears their engineering team is making adjustments in real time." Through the sensor feed, Kethavar could actually see human engineers crawling through the damaged ship's superstructure, rerouting power conduits by hand, and jury-rigging systems that should have required weeks of shipyard work. Add body text. The Defiant fired its last torpedo, a primitive nuclear device that his point defense systems should have intercepted easily. Instead, the torpedo somehow navigated through the defensive fire by following a completely random trajectory that no targeting computer could predict. It struck the inevitable logic's shield generator. "Shields down to 60%, the defensive systems officer reported. "How?" Kethavar demanded. "That torpedo was following no coherent flight path." "Sir," the sensor operator said hesitantly, "it appears the human pilot was flying it manually." "Manually?" "Remote piloting, sir. A human pilot was controlling the torpedo directly, reacting to our defensive fire in real time." Kethavar pulled up the sensor data. The torpedo's flight path looked like something drawn by a child with a crayon. Loops, spirals, and sudden direction changes that followed no mathematical logic whatsoever. Yet it had been devastatingly effective. "Sir," Vexmari said urgently, "the Defiant is on final approach. Estimated impact in 30 seconds. Kethavar looked at the tactical display one more time. The human ship was coming straight at them, engines failing, weapons depleted, hull breached in a dozen places. By every measure of military science, it was already dead, but it was still moving. "All batteries, concentrate fire on the human flagship," he ordered. The combined firepower of a dozen Zephyrian warships focused on the approaching Defiant. Energy beams and projectiles that could have leveled a city struck the human vessel repeatedly, and it kept coming. 20 seconds to impact, Vexmari reported. Kethavar could see Captain Chen on his screen now. The human captain had apparently activated her ship's external cameras. She was sitting in what appeared to be a command chair held together with tape and determination, surrounded by sparking consoles and emergency lighting. She was smiling. 10 seconds, Vexmari whispered. "Computer," Kethavar said quickly. "Final probability analysis. What are the chances of human victory in this scenario?" "Calculating. Mathematical impossibility detected. Human victory probability approaches statistical impossibility, yet empirical evidence suggests imminent success. 5 seconds. Kethavar made a decision that would haunt Zephyrian military doctrine for generations to come. "All ships," he transmitted on the fleet frequency, "withdraw to minimum safe distance." "Sir?" Vexmari stared at him in shock. "You heard me. Pull back." The Zephyrian fleet began to withdraw just as the UES Defiant reached ramming distance of the flagship. But instead of impact, the human ship suddenly fired its maneuvering thrusters and pulled up alongside the inevitable logic. Captain Chen's voice came over the comm one final time. "Admiral, this is Captain Sarah Chen. I'm officially accepting your surrender." 3 hours later, Kethavar sat in his quarters staring at a formal report that would end his military career. He had surrendered a fleet of over 1,000 ships to 5 human vessels held together by improvisation and sheer bloody-mindedness. The mathematics didn't make sense. They had won a battle they couldn't possibly win through methods that shouldn't possibly work. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Captain Chen walked in, still wearing a damaged EVA suit and carrying a helmet that had been cracked and sealed with some kind of polymer patch. She looked exactly like what she was. a soldier who had just fought an impossible battle and won. "Captain," Kethvar said formally, "I suppose you're here to discuss terms." "Actually," Chen said, settling into the chair across from his desk, "I wanted to understand something. Your fleet could have wiped us out in the first 5 minutes. Your technology is better, your numbers were overwhelming, your tactics were flawless. Why didn't you win?" Kethvar considered the question for a long moment. "Because," he said finally, "our tactics were flawless. We calculated every variable, planned for every contingency, optimized every system, but we planned for a battle against rational opponents. And we're not rational? Captain, you flew a ship held together with emergency patches through concentrated fire from 1,000 vessels. You used nuclear weapons like thrown rocks. You turned your own ships into improvised weapons. You continued fighting when any logical species would have surrendered." He paused. "No, you are not rational, and that's why you won." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "You know what our real advantage was, Admiral? I would be interested to hear your assessment. We didn't know we couldn't win. Oh, intellectually we knew the odds were against us, but emotionally, psychologically, we just saw another problem to solve. Humans have been solving impossible problems since we figured out how to make fire. Conquering space was impossible. Faster than light travel was impossible. Building colonies on worlds that didn't want us was impossible." She grinned. "We're good at impossible." Kethvar filed that assessment away for future reference. If he survived the court-martial that was certainly coming, he would recommend extensive revision of Zephyrian military doctrine regarding human opponents. "There's something else," Chen continued. "My superiors are going to want to know if this was an isolated incident or if we should expect more Zephyrian fleets." "Captain," Kethvar said with something approaching admiration, "after today's battle report reaches high command, I believe the Zephyrian Empire will be pursuing diplomatic solutions with human colonies. Military action against your species has been reclassified as tactically inadvisable." Chen stood and extended her hand, a human gesture Kethvar had learned about but never experienced. He reached out with one of his 4 hands and awkwardly shook it. "Admiral," she said, "it's been a pleasure doing impossible things with you." As she left, Kethvar turned back to his report. How did one explain to a civilization built on mathematical certainty that they had been defeated by a species that treated impossibility as a challenge rather than a limitation? He began typing. Recommendation: humans do not respond to conventional tactical doctrine. They appear to become more dangerous when facing mathematically insurmountable odds. Further study required to understand phenomenon labeled human stubbornness and its military applications. Outside his viewport, the 5 remaining human ships were limping toward their space station for repairs, leaving behind a debris field containing the remains of 37 Zephyrian vessels. 5 ships had defeated 1,000, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through sheer refusal to accept defeat. Kethvar made a mental note to recommend that impossible be removed from all future tactical assessments involving human opponents. 6 months later, the Battle of New Geneva had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Military academies studied it as an example of how psychological factors could overcome tactical disadvantages. Diplomats cited it as proof that humans were a species to be respected rather than conquered. But in the cantinas and bars frequented by soldiers and spacers throughout known space, they told a simpler version of the story. Never tell a human something is impossible. They take it personally. The Zephyrian Empire formally established diplomatic relations with the Colonial Federation within a year. The peace treaty contained an unusual clause. Any future conflicts would be resolved through negotiation rather than military action. The official reason given was economic efficiency. The real reason was that Zephyrian military computers had calculated the cost of conquering a species that fought harder when losing, and the mathematics simply didn't work out. Captain Sarah Chen was promoted to admiral, and given command of the Colonial Federation's first defense fleet. Her flagship, the UES Defiant Blackhund, carried a motto that would become famous throughout human space. Logic is optional, victory is not. And on distant worlds where other species looked up at the stars and wondered about the strange bipedal creatures who had somehow carved out an empire through sheer stubborn refusal to quit, parents would tell their children stories about the species that had turned impossibility into an art form. The humans, they would say, were the ones who looked at the universe and said, "You think you can stop us? Watch this." And then they would do exactly what everyone said couldn't be done. Because that's what humans do. They don't just fight impossible odds. They make impossibility surrender.